Hello guys, I'm Tom, and today we'll be analyzing the trailer for Good Fortune. Keanu Reeves as an angel, but not a wise, enlightened, and celestial one. Instead, a completely disoriented angel, lost in the middle of a divine plan that slips out of his hands from the very first moment. That's how Good Fortune begins, the new fantasy comedy written, directed, and starring Aziz Ansari. A risky and peculiar bet that, even before its release, is already making noise on social media, specialized media outlets, and film forums due to its unusual premise, its genre mix, and above all, for showing us a Keanu in a register as unexpected as it is refreshing. In this video, we're going to break down the story behind this project, analyze its aesthetic and narrative approach, and try to understand why the trailer, although it lasts only a few minutes, has been enough to ignite the enthusiasm and curiosity of those looking for comedies with more than just easy jokes. Because yes, there is surreal humor, social satire, and a not-so-subtle critique of the modern world, but there is also heart, uncomfortable questions, and moments that feel as absurd as they do relatable. Spoiler alert! This is not the typical celestial moral tale. The premise, seemingly simple, is actually a narrative time bomb. Gabriel, played by Reeves, is an inexperienced and clumsy angel whose mission is to improve the life of Arj, a working-class delivery driver barely scraping by. The divine plan seems straightforward. Swap Arj's life with that of Jeff, an arrogant, narcissistic billionaire completely disconnected from the real world, played by Seth Rogen. But what in theory should be a heavenly intervention to rebalance fate soon turns into an overflowing cosmic satire. Arj adapts way too well to his new life of luxury and privilege. Jeff falls into a deep existential crisis when faced with precarity, and Gabriel, who is supposed to be the spiritual guide of the process, loses his wings and becomes trapped on Earth as a mere human. A disaster with divine implications, but also a comedy that aims straight at the heart of our social structures. What's interesting about Good Fortune is that it's not content with being just an absurd story about angels and body swaps. It uses its outrageous concept to ask deep questions. What does it really mean to improve a life? Can money buy happiness or just mask the emptiness? How fragile are our ideas of success and failure? And what happens when even celestial agents fail in their purpose? These are serious themes wrapped in a narrative that never takes itself too seriously, but knows exactly where to strike. Visually, the film proposes a bright, almost dreamlike aesthetic that subtly filters into everyday life. Shining wings floating amid urban chaos, corner cafes turned into settings for divine discussions, and a city where the magical and the ordinary coexist naturally. Adam Newport-Bera's cinematography captures this duality with a camera that moves between the poetic and the mundane without losing agility or visual clarity. The music, composed by Carter Burwell, adds an emotional layer that balances the humor with moments of genuine vulnerability, making even the most absurd passages feel anchored to something real. Aziz Ansari, in his feature film directorial debut, shows he has a firm grip on tone. Besides directing, he stars as Arj, the delivery driver whose life takes an unexpected turn. His performance, like his direction, is marked by a particular sensitivity, a mix of irony, compassion, and social awareness. Ansari builds a comedy that talks about inequality, broken dreams, and the limits of meritocracy, but without ever losing pace or falling into solemnity. The result is a film that feels agile, funny, and deeply human. And at the center of it all, Keanu Reeves. His role as Gabriel is perhaps one of the most atypical in his recent career. Forget the unflappable action hero or the silent wise man. Here, Reeves plays a naive, emotionally confused angel with a sense of duty bordering on pathetic, and he does it with disarming tenderness. It's a vulnerable, comedic, almost childlike Keanu, who shows he still has many registers to explore and is willing to laugh at himself. In summary, Good Fortune is not just a comedy about angels, the rich, and the poor. It's a satire about our aspirations, our failures, and the absurd idea that there is a perfect plan for everyone. It's a film that bets on the unexpected, isn't afraid to mix the divine with the ridiculous, and seems to have something to say, even while making us laugh. For all these reasons, beyond the initial hype, it promises to become one of the most original and possibly most memorable comedies of the year. One of the biggest draws of Good Fortune is, without a doubt, its cast. It's one of those casting combinations that already sparks curiosity on paper. Seth Rogen plays Jeff, an egocentric, egotistical tech mogul disconnected from reality. The typical 1% who lives in a bubble of privilege and who, paradoxically, becomes one of the key pieces of the divine plan. His comedic style, which usually balances ridiculousness with a certain emotional depth, works perfectly as a counterpart to the story. But he's not alone. Keke Palmer and Sandra Oh round out the cast with performances that add charisma, pace, and dramatic presence. Palmer brings freshness and irreverence, while Oh, playing a celestial supervisor exhausted by the bureaucracy of the afterlife, gives the story a touch of authority and cosmic weariness that fits perfectly with the film's satirical tone. Now, the real twist, the biggest surprise in the cast, is Keanu Reeves. In a move no one saw coming, Reeves puts aside the weapons, stoicism, and emotional intensity of John Wick to literally put on a celestial robe. His character, Gabriel, is a confused angel with an almost permanent expression of not quite understanding what he's gotten himself into. It's a role that forces him to explore aspects he has rarely shown on screen: clumsiness, insecurity, emotional confusion. And the best part is that this bewilderment, this mix of celestial solemnity and human awkwardness, suits him perfectly. There's something about his presence that makes you want to like him even when his character is completely lost. Although the film's release is scheduled for October 17th, 2025, the first reactions to the trailer have been surprisingly positive. Outlets like Gizmodo described it as absurd and brilliant, highlighting its irreverent and original tone, while the Daily Beast called it a comedy where an angel fights capitalism, a phrase that sounds like a meme but holds a rather profound truth. Because Good Fortune doesn't stay on the surface. Beneath its fantasy comedy appearance lies a sharp, clear social critique without many filters. Aziz Ansari, who not only directed and starred but also wrote the screenplay, has been very direct in his promotional interviews. His goal, he says, is to revitalize comedy cinema, to take it off autopilot and propose something that, besides entertaining, makes you think. In a landscape where many comedies seem like rehashes of the same formulas, Good Fortune stands as a risky mix of social satire, magical realism, and political commentary, with a cast ready to move fluidly between drama and laughter. It's not an easy combination, but precisely because of that, the proposal feels fresh. One of the most interesting themes the film tackles is how we idealize social change. The story mocks the idea that poverty is solved with good intentions or isolated miracles. It questions the notion of meritocracy, the discourse of individual effort, and does so through a narrative in which even heaven, yes, heaven, has organizational problems. Because in the universe of Good Fortune, not even angels have a clear idea of how to improve a life, and celestial systems are as full of paperwork, misunderstandings, and human errors as any earthly ministry. That divine bureaucracy is, curiously, one of the funniest and most terrifying discoveries in the script. Ultimately, Good Fortune promises to be one of those hard-to-classify but impossible-to-ignore films, a comedy with the soul of a modern parable, Keanu Reeves as a clumsy, emotionally lost angel. Aziz Ansari as a human struggling to improve his situation in a world that doesn't always allow it, and a story that dares to mix the spiritual with the economic, the sacred with the absurd. It talks about money, class, identity, but also about faith, purpose, and that very human need to understand what we are doing with our lives, even when you're literally at God's service. And that's what makes it special. Its ability to use humor to discuss complex topics without falling into preaching, but also without falling into emptiness. If you're looking for a comedy with something more behind the easy joke, or you just want to break out of the traditional blockbuster mold, mark this date on your calendar. October. Theaters, Confused Angels, and Miracles with the Fine Print. If you liked this analysis, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments, Keanu as an angel, does it work or not? Do you prefer him giving sermons or shooting up half the city? Honestly, I can't wait to see how this story, both absurd and brilliant, unfolds. Because sometimes, to understand heaven, you have to look closely at earth.